You know that moment. It's late. The day is already behind you, but your brain hasn't caught up yet. You open your banking app almost without thinking. Not to admire anything, just to check. For a long time, this moment came with tension, a tight feeling in your chest, a reflex you didn't choose, because the number on the screen always meant something urgent, something fragile, something that could go wrong fast. But this time, it's different. The balance isn't impressive, it's not life-changing, it's not even comfortable, but it's there. $1,000, sitting quietly. You don't smile, you don't celebrate, you pause, and for the first time in a long while, you don't panic. No mental math spiraling forward, no immediate list of worst-case scenarios, no instinct to brace yourself for impact. Just space? That's the strange part. Nothing external changed. You didn't get rich. You didn't level up your lifestyle. You didn't fix your entire financial life. And yet something feels lighter. Earlier, this app meant pressure, a reminder of how close everything felt, how quickly one problem could turn into a crisis. Now it feels neutral, not safe, not secure, but not threatening either. The lion notices it immediately. The absence of urgency, the absence of fear, the absence of that constant background noise that usually follows every number. This isn't about discipline or budgeting or finally doing things right. It's about a moment your nervous system recognizes before your logic does. For the first time, the future doesn't feel like it's standing right behind you. That's when the thought appears, quiet but clear. If one small number can change how this moment feels, what else might it be changing without you noticing? Because this doesn't feel like more money. It feels like the beginning of something easier. And that's not what anyone tells you to look for. But once you've felt this moment, you realize how loud the fear was before, and how much of your life was shaped by trying to avoid it. Before that moment, life feels different, not dramatically worse, just tighter. Money isn't something you think about occasionally, it's something humming in the background at all times. A low, constant noise you've learned to live with. Every decision passes through it. You don't ask, is this worth it? You ask, will this mess something up? Groceries aren't chosen by preference. They're chosen by math, by habit, by what you already know won't cause problems later. Unexpected expenses don't feel inconvenient. They feel dangerous. A flat tire isn't just a hassle, it's a disruption. A doctor's bill isn't just a bill, it's a question mark that follows you for weeks. So you stay alert. You check your account often, not because you expect something good, but because you need to catch problems early. That vigilance takes energy. Even when nothing goes wrong, your body stays ready. Ready to adjust, ready to cut back, ready to compensate. Plans are tentative, invitations come with mental calculations. Yes always has an asterisk. You don't fully relax into anything. This isn't irresponsibility, it's adaptation. Living close to zero teaches you speed, how to react quickly, how to recover, how to stretch. But it also trains your brain to prioritize immediacy. Solve the problem now, reduce the pressure, get back to baseline. Long-term thinking becomes a luxury, not because you don't understand it, but because the present keeps demanding attention. In this state, good decisions don't disappear, they just get harder to access. Not because you lack discipline, but because discipline requires room. Room to wait, room to pause, room to choose something slightly uncomfortable now for something better later. When there's no buffer, there's no pause. Every choice feels urgent. Every mistake feels amplified. Every setback feels personal. You start measuring yourself by how well you hold things together, how few cracks are visible, how long you can keep the plate spinning. From the outside, it might look fine, functional, stable, but inside, everything is calibrated for defense. You're not building, you're maintaining, and maintenance consumes attention. It drains energy quietly. That's the part most people miss. Before the first $1,000, life isn't chaotic, it's fragile. And fragility changes how every decision feels, long before it changes how anything looks. Here's the part most people misunderstand. That first $1,000 doesn't change your lifestyle. It doesn't upgrade your life. It doesn't unlock comfort or freedom. What it changes is the space between things. Before it, problems collide with you directly. An expense shows up, and it hits your nervous system first. There's no distance, no buffer, no pause. With that first $1,000, a gap appears. Not a big one, not a luxurious one, just enough. Enough to slow the moment down, enough to breathe before reacting, enough to decide instead of panicking. That's what the money buys. Not stuff, not security, time. Time to look at a problem without immediately bracing for impact. Time to say, okay, let's figure this out, instead of, oh no. This is why the shift feels bigger than the number. The lion notices it in small ways. A bill arrives and doesn't hijack the entire evening. A surprise expense doesn't turn into a mental spiral. The banking app stops being a threat detector. Nothing dramatic happens, but the volume drops. That constant background tension, the one that used to hum beneath every decision, quiets down just enough to notice. This is the moment thinking comes back online. Not because the lion became smarter, but because the environment stopped shouting. When pressure eases, logic has room to work. Choices start to separate. What used to feel like one urgent mess becomes a series of manageable steps. That's the real upgrade. The lion doesn't suddenly make perfect decisions. He just stops making rushed ones. And that changes everything downstream. Because rushed decisions aren't bad because they're wrong. They're bad because they're reactive. They solve the moment at the expense of the future. With a small buffer, that trade-off isn't forced anymore. The future stops feeling like an enemy. That's why this $1,000 feels powerful. It's not wealth, it's oxygen. Just enough to remind you what thinking clearly feels like. And once you remember that feeling, you start realizing how long you've been operating without it. Once that small buffer exists, life doesn't suddenly become good, it becomes quieter, and that difference matters more than it sounds. Before, every decision arrived already loud, already urgent, already demanding an answer. What should I do? What if this goes wrong? What if something else happens right after? That constant pressure turns even simple choices into weight, not because they're complex, but because they stack. With no margin, decisions don't reset. They accumulate. One choice bleeds into the next. One worry triggers another. There's no clean break. That's what makes life feel hard, not the size of the problems, the lack of recovery between them. The first $1,000 changes that rhythm. Now, when something comes up, it lands in space instead of chaos. There's a pause, a breath, a moment where the lion doesn't have to react instantly. That pause does something subtle. It restores confidence. Not the loud kind, not optimism. The quiet confidence that says, I can handle this. Not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the situation is no longer threatening by default. This is where decisions start to improve. Not dramatically, not all at once, but consistently. The lion waits a little longer before buying, thinks one step further ahead, chooses convenience less often, not out of discipline, out of clarity. Clarity only shows up when pressure drops. That's why advice feels useless without margin. You can know exactly what the right move is and still be unable to make it if every decision feels like it carries survival level risk. The buffer removes that distortion. It separates inconvenience from danger. A bill becomes a problem, not a threat. A delay becomes annoying, not catastrophic. That separation changes how the brain categorizes events. When everything is dangerous, nothing can be planned calmly. When some things are merely inconvenient, planning becomes possible again. This is why people say life feels easier. Not because they're doing less, but because their mind isn't constantly bracing. They're no longer spending energy preparing for impact that never actually comes. And that reclaimed energy matters. It spills into work, into relationships, into sleep. The lion isn't just making better money decisions, he's making fewer defensive ones. And defense is exhausting. Once life stops feeling like something you have to constantly guard against, Forward motion stops feeling dangerous. That's when ease appears, not as luxury, as stability you can actually feel. This is where most people misunderstand what just happened. They think life feels easier because they finally have money, because they crossed some invisible line, because things are now okay. But that's not it. $1,000 doesn't fix your finances. It doesn't make you safe. It doesn't solve the future. What it does is far quieter. It changes how your mind relates to uncertainty. Before, uncertainty felt dangerous. Every unknown carried weight. Every surprise felt like a threat that could tip everything over. Now, uncertainty is still uncomfortable, but it's no longer terrifying. That difference rewrites how you move through life. The lion doesn't suddenly become fearless. He becomes less defensive. He stops treating every choice like it has to be perfect. Stops assuming every mistake will be fatal. Stops bracing for impact before it arrives. That's the real shift. When your nervous system isn't constantly activated, you regain access to something simple and powerful. Judgment. Not discipline, not motivation, judgment. The ability to weigh options without panic. To choose between good and better instead of between bad and worse. This is why the first $1,000 matters more than the next 10. It's not about accumulation, it's about orientation. It turns money from a constant emergency into a tool you can actually think with. That's why chasing bigger numbers without margin rarely works. You can earn more and still feel cornered if every dollar is already committed. You can look successful and still live defensively. The lion sees that now. Winning was never about how much he earned, or how quickly he moved, or how impressive his progress looked. Winning was about how much room he had when something went wrong, how many decisions he could delay, how many mistakes he could absorb, how often he could pause instead of react. That's margin. And margin doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up on social feeds. It doesn't photograph well. But it changes everything that matters. Sleep gets deeper, decisions get slower, mistakes lose their power. The world doesn't suddenly become kind, but it becomes negotiable. Once you feel that shift, it becomes hard to unsee. You stop chasing money for what it promises and start valuing what it actually gives you. Not comfort, not status, space, space to think, space to choose, space to live without constantly preparing for collapse. That's why life gets easier after your first $1,000. Not because you have more, but because for the first time, you're no longer operating on the edge of everything going wrong. If this video changed the way you think, hit like and subscribe. More ideas like this are coming. See you in the next one.